This anointing by Jesus that we heard in the passage from Matthew is attested to in all four Gospels, meaning that the Gospel writers thought it was pretty important. But among these four accounts of some kind of an anointing that happened to Jesus by a woman are a lot of differences, and it gets pretty confusing. So what I wanted to do first is just talk about the many kinds of anointing that actually existed in that day in Palestine. Olive oil was very, very common. It was used for lots of things, used in lamps, used for healing, used in the way we use creams and lotions today because it's a desert climate, etc. So, first of all, anointing can be something that is done to a dead body. The body is washed and it is anointed with olive oil, and by far most commonly with the addition of myrrh, which is from a tree and it's a powder. It smells really nice. Or from what they call aloes, but that's not the aloe that we think about. It's actually from aloe wood, and it's another fairly fragrant kind of a powder. Neither of these were terribly expensive. Many households kept supplies on hand because death, unfortunately, was a very, very common occurrence. And so we have anointing of a dead body. Anointing happened for healing. We know Jesus did this in his ministry, and he taught his disciples to do it as well when he sent them out. There are these, again, probably, I think it's in Mark, is probably the most expansive discussion of this. But what happens is the disciples go out and heal many and anoint them with oil. That's common, olive oil as well. Then there is an anointing of feet. Now, the feet were that was the bottom, literally, and philosophically. And so when you came into someone's house, almost always hospitality included someone washing your feet, which tended to be really filthy because it was dusty and hot, and they were wearing open sandals or were sometimes barefoot. The person who washed the feet was usually a servant. They were of low status themselves, which is why it's so interesting when Jesus kneels down and washes the feet of his disciples. It's something that would have often been done by a very lowly, usually woman servant. And then we have an anointing that is an anointing of the head. Now that's the opposite, and it has an opposite meaning. This isn't about the person doing it being humble and offering a service. This is about setting someone aside as very special, very powerful, someone very, very important. And the person putting that oil or perfume on the head also is implied to have some significant status. Okay, so we have all these anointings, and it's not often clear, but in these accounts we have Jesus' feet anointed and we have Jesus' head anointed. We also know it's a woman because it says that in all the accounts. In one, it identifies her as Mary of Bethany, who was the sister of Lazarus and of Martha. In another, it simply says Mary. Well, this is a problem because there were quite a number of Marys in his ministry, and it's often not clear in the Gospels which Mary is being referred to. Sometimes it will say, but often it'll say Mary, and we don't know. So we have that. Who is this person? Apparently her name is Mary. In at least one account, she's not named at all. She's an unnamed woman. Okay? And then what we have is, when did this happen? Three of the accounts say it happened in Bethany. In at least one, the implication is it happened that last week before Jesus was executed. So he went up to Jerusalem for Passover, and he stayed with his friends, apparently, Lazarus, Martha, and Mary, in Bethany, which is very close to Jerusalem. And so they had housing there. So scholars have a ton of fun with this, because you can find whatever you want. Was he being honored? Was the person being humbled? Who was this person doing it? When did it happen? Where did it happen? In the reading that you had, it happened in the house of a leper. In another reading, it happens in the house of a Pharisee, and it doesn't say it was in Bethany at all. It could mean that Jesus is anointed a number of times during his ministry. Definite possibility. It could mean that this particularly refers to a really important moment that happened in that last week of his life, which is that some woman anointed his head, setting him aside as someone very special and very powerful. Now, Christ means the anointed one, right? The Messiah is the anointed one. So this is the place in the Gospels where we see someone anointing him with the kind of anointing that happens when someone is set apart as blessed and as special. So some scholars think that probably these are garbled accounts, but for sure what emerges is that Jesus was anointed in that final week. And hence the designation as the Christ or the Messiah. That he was anointed by a woman would have been something of notice for this kind of anointing. It wouldn't be completely unheard of, but eyebrows would have been raised. If the anointing happened with something like nard, which was extremely expensive, a common person's salary for a year would buy the kind of amount of nard that we're talking about. And you can understand why the disciples might be like, hey, we could do a lot in this ministry. What are you doing? Buying something this expensive and putting it on Jesus. It would make sense if this Mary, by the way, is Mary Magdalene, who appeared to be a woman of wealth. And many scholars think, in fact, probably it was Mary Magdalene who did this. She certainly would have had the money to buy the nard. But this would have made her something of a figure and powerful in her own right, as well as the person who anoints Jesus, who then becomes the Messiah, which if you think about is a very special kind of a ritual that happens there. So we can take our choice. Lots of dissertations have been written about this. I think the one safe thing it is to say is that a woman did this, and it happened during Holy Week, and it was so special and so important that it was written about in some form in all 4 of the Gospels.